Chapter 7. Queer Lodgings. The next morning, Bilbo woke up with the early sun in his eyes. He jumped up to look at the time and to go and put his kettle on, and found he was not home at all. So he sat down and wished in vain for a wash and a brush. He did not get either, nor tea, nor toast, nor bacon for his breakfast. Only cold mutton and rabbit. And after that, he had to get ready for a fresh start. This time, he was allowed to climb onto an eagle's back and cling between his wings. The air rushed over him, and he shut his eyes. The dwarves were crying farewells and promising to repay the Lord of the Eagles if ever they could. As off rose 15 great birds from the mountain's side. The sun was still close to the eastern edge of things. The morning was cool, and mists were in the valleys and hollows entwined here and there about the peaks and pinnacles of the hills. Bilbo opened an eye to peep and saw that the birds were already high up, and the world was far away, and the mountains were falling back behind them into the distance. He shut his eyes again and held on tighter. "Don't pinch," said the eagle. "You need not be frightened like a rabbit, even if you look rather like one. It is a fair morning with little wind. What is finer than flying?" Bilbo would have liked to say, a warm bath and late breakfast on the lawn afterwards, but he thought it better to say nothing at all and to let go his clutch just a tiny bit. After a good while, the eagles must have seen that the point they were making for, even from their great height, for they began to go down, circling round in great spirals. They did this for a long while, and at last the hobbit opened his eyes again. The earth was much nearer, and below them were trees that looked like oaks and elms, and wide grasslands, and a river running through it all, but cropping out of the ground right in the path of the stream, which looped itself about it, was a great rock, almost a hill of stone, like a last outpost of the distant mountains, or a huge piece cast miles into the plain by some giant among giants. Quickly now to the top of this rock, the eagles swooped one by one and set down their passengers. "Farewell," they cried, "wherever you fare, till your eyries receive you at the journey's end." That is the polite thing to say among eagles. "May the wind under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks," answered Gandalf, who knew the correct reply. And so they parted, and though the Lord of the Eagles became in after days the king of all birds, and wore a golden crown, and his 15 chieftains golden collars made of the gold that the dwarves gave them, Bilbo never saw them again, except high and far off in the battle of 5 armies. But as that comes in at the end of this tale, we will say no more about it just now. There was a flat place and a flat space on the top of the hill, of stone and a well-worn path with many steps leading down it to the river, across which a fort of huge flat stones led to the grassland beyond the stream. There was a little cave, a wholesome one with a pebbly floor, at the foot of the steps and near the end of the stony ford. Here the party gathered and discussed what was to be done. I always meant to see you all safe, if possible, over the mountains, said the wizard. And now by good management and good luck I have done it. Indeed, we are now a good deal further east than I ever meant to come with you. For after all, this is not my adventure. I may look in on it again before it is all over, but in the meanwhile I have some other pressing business to attend to. The dwarves groaned and looked most distressed, and Bilbo wept. They had begun to think Gandalf was going to come all the way and would always be there to help them out of difficulties. I am not going to disappear this very instant, said he. I can give you a day or two more. Probably I can help you out of your present plight, and I need a little help myself. We have no food and no baggage and no ponies to ride, and you don't know where you are. Now I can tell you that you are still some miles north of the path which we should have been following if we had not left the mountain pass in a hurry. Very few people live in these parts, unless they have come here since I was last laid down this way, which is some years ago. But there is somebody that I know of who lives not far away, but that somebody made the steps on the great rock, the Carrack, I believe he calls it. He does not come here often, certainly not in the daytime, and it is no good waiting for him. In fact, it would be very dangerous. We must go and find him, and if all goes well at our meeting, I think I shall be off and wish you, like the eagles, farewell wherever you fare. They begged him not to leave them. They offered him dragon gold and silver and jewels, but he would not change his mind. We shall see, he said, and I think I have earned already some of your dragon gold when you have got it. After that, they stopped pleading. Then they took off their clothes and bathed in the river, which was shallow and clear and stony at the ford. When they had dried in the sun, which was now strong and warm, they were refreshed, if still sore and a little hungry. Soon they crossed the ford carrying the hobbit, and then began to march through the long green grass and down the lines of the wide-armed oaks and the tall elms. And why is it called the Carrack? Asked Bilbo as he went along at the wizard's side. He called it the Carrack because Carrack is the word for it. He calls things like that Carrack, and this one is the Carrack because it is the only one near his home, and he knows it well. Who calls it? Who knows it? The somebody I spoke of, a very great person. You must all be very polite when I introduce you. I shall introduce you slowly, two by two, I think, and you must be careful not to annoy him, or heaven knows what will happen. He can be appalling when he is angry. Though he is kind enough if humored, still I warn you, he gets angry easily. The dwarves all gathered round when they heard the wizard talking like this to Bilbo. Is that the person you are taking us to now? They asked. Couldn't you find someone more easy-tempered? Hadn't you better explain it all a bit clearer? And so on. Yes, it certainly is. No, I could not, and I was explaining very carefully, answered the wizard crossly. If you must know more, his name is Bjorn. He is very strong and he is a skin changer. What? A furrier? A man that calls rabbits conies when he doesn't turn their skin into squirrels? Asked Bilbo. Good gracious heavens, no, 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 said Gandalf. Don't be a fool, Mr. Baggins, if you can help it. And in the name of all wonder, don't mention the word furrier again as long as you are within 100 miles of this house. Nor rug, cape, tippet, muff, nor any other such unfortunate word. He is a skin changer. He changes his skin. Sometimes he is a huge black bear. Sometimes he is a great, strong, black-haired man with huge arms and a great beard. I cannot tell you much more, though that ought to be enough. Some say that he is a bear descended from the great and ancient bears of the mountains that lived there before the giants came. Others say that he is a man descended from the first men who lived before Smaug or the other dragons came into this part of the world, and before the goblins came in the hills out of the north. I cannot say, though I fancy the last is the true tale. He is not the sort of person to ask questions of. At any rate, he is under no enchantment but his own. He lives in an oak world and has a great wooden house. And as a man, he keeps cattle and horses which are nearly as marvelous as himself. They work for him and talk to him. He does not eat them, neither does he hunt or eat wild animals. He keeps hives and hives of great fierce bees and lives most on cream and honey. As a bear, he ranges far and wide. I once saw him sitting all alone on the top of the Carrick at night, watching the moon sinking toward the misty mountain, and I heard him growl in the tongue of bears. The day will come when they will perish, and I shall go back. That is why I believe he once came from the mountain himself. Bilbo and the dwarves had now plenty to think about, and they asked no more questions. They still had a long way to walk before them. Up slope and down dale they plodded. It grew very hot. Sometimes they rested under the trees, and then Bilbo felt so hungry that he would have eaten acorns, if any had been ripe enough yet to have fallen to the ground. It was the middle of the afternoon before they noticed that great patches of flowers had begun to spring up, all the same kinds growing together as if they had been planted. Especially there was clover, waving patches of coxcomb clover and purple clover, and wide stretches of short, white, sweet, honey-smelling clover. There was a buzzing and a whirring and a droning in the air. Bees were busy everywhere. And such bees! Bilbo had never seen anything like them. If one was to sting you, he thought, I should swell up as big as I am. They were bigger than hornets. The drones were bigger than your thumb, a good deal, and the bands of yellow on their deep black bodies shone like fierce gold. We are getting near, said Gandalf. We are on the edge of his bee pastures. After a while, they came to a belt of tall and very ancient oaks, and beyond these to a high thorn hedge through which you could neither see nor scramble. You had better wait here, said the wizard to the dwarves, and when I call or whistle, begin to come after me. You will see the way I go, but only in pairs. Mind, about 5 minutes between each pair of you. Bomber is fattest and will do for two. He had better come alone and fast and last. Come on, Mr. Baggins. There is a gate somewhere round this way. And with that, he went off along the hedge, taking the frightened hobbit with him. They soon came to a wooden gate, high and broad, beyond which they could see gardens and a cluster of low wooden buildings, some thatched and made of unshaped logs, barns, stables, sheds, and a long, low wooden house. Inside, on the southward side of the great hedge, were rows and rows of hives with bell-shaped tops made of straw. The noise of the giant bees flying to and fro and crawling in and out filled all the air. The wizard and the hobbit pushed open the heavy, creaking gate and went down a wide track toward the house. Some horses, very sleek and well groomed, trotted up across the grass and looked at them intently with very intelligent faces. Then off they galloped to the buildings. They have gone to tell him of the arrival of strangers. Soon they reached a courtyard, 3 walls of which were formed by the wooden house and its 2 long wings. In the middle there was lying a great oak trunk with many lopped branches beside it. Standing near was a huge man with a thick black beard and hair, and great bare arms and legs with knotted muscles. He was clothed in a tunic of wool down to his knees, and was leaning on a large axe. The horses were standing by him with their noses at his shoulder. Here they are, he said to the horses. They don't look dangerous. You can be off. He laughed a great rolling laugh, put down his axe, and came forward. Who are you, and what do you want? He asked gruffly, standing in front of them and towering tall above Gandalf. As for Bilbo, he could easily have trotted through his legs without ducking his head to miss the fringe of the man's brown tunic. I am Gandalf, said the wizard. Never heard of him, growled the man. And what's this little fellow? He said, stooping down to frown at the hobbit with his bushy black eyebrows. This is Mr. Baggins, a hobbit of good family and an unimpeachable reputation, said Gandalf. Bilbo bowed. He had no hat to take off, and was painfully conscious of his many missing buttons. I am a wizard, continued Gandalf. I have heard of you, if you have not heard of me, but perhaps you have heard of my good cousin Radagast, who lives near the southern borders of Mirkwood. Yes, not a bad fellow as wizards go, I believe. I used to see him now and again, said Beorn. Well, now I know who you are and who you say you are. What do you want? To tell you the truth, we have lost our luggage and nearly lost our way, and are rather in need of help, or at least of advice. I may say we have had rather a bad time with goblins to the mountains. Goblins, said the big man less gruffly. Oh, so you've been having trouble with them, have you? What did you go near them for? We did not mean to. They surprised us at night in a pass which we had to cross. We were coming out of the lands of west. We were coming out of the lands over west into these countries. It is a long tale. Then you had better come inside and tell me some of it, if we don't take all day, said the man, leading the way through a dark door that opened out of the courtyard into the house. Following him, they found themselves in a wide hall with a fire placed in the middle. Though it was summer, there was a wood fire burning, and the smoke was rising in the blackened rafters. in search of the way out through an opening in the roof. They passed through this dim hall, lit only by the fire and the hole above it, and came through another smaller door into sort of veranda propped on wooden posts made of single tree trunks. It faced south and was still warm and filled with the light of the westering sun which slanted into it and fell golden on the garden full of flowers that came right up to the steps. Here they sat on wooden benches while Gandalf began his tale, and Bilbo swung his dangling legs and looked at the flowers in the garden, wondering what their names could be, as he had never seen half of them before. I was coming over the mountains with a friend or two, said the wizard. Or two? I can only see one, and a little one at that, said Beorn. Well, to tell you the truth, I did not like to bother you with a lot of us until I found out if you were busy. I will give you a call if I may. Go on, call away. So Gandalf gave a long, shrill whistle, and presently Thorin and Dori came round the house by the garden path and stood bowing low before them. One or three you meant, I see, said Beorn, but these aren't hobbits, they are dwarves. Thorin Oakenshield, at your service. Dori, at your service, said the two dwarves, bowing again. I don't need your service, thank you, said Beorn, but I expect you need mine. I am not over fond of dwarves, but if it is true you are Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, I believe, and that your companion is respectable, and that you are enemies of goblins and are not up to any mischief in my lands. What are you up to, by the way? They are on their way to visit the land of their fathers, away east beyond Mirkwood, put in Gandalf, and it is entirely an accident that we are in your lands at all. We were crossing by the high pass that should have brought us to the road that lies to the south of your country, when we were attacked by the evil goblins, as I was about to tell you. Go on telling, then, said Beorn, who was never very polite. There was a terrible storm. The stone giants were out hurtling rocks, and at the head of the pass, we took refuge in a cave, the hobbit and I and several of our companions. Do you call two several? Well, no. As a matter of fact, there were more than two. Where are they? Killed? Eaten? Gone home? Well, no. They don't seem all to have come when I whistled. Shy, I expect. You see, we are very much afraid that we are rather a lot for you to entertain. Go on, whistle again. I am in for a party, it seems, and one or two more won't make much difference, growled Beorn. Gandalf whistled again, but Nori and Ori were there almost before he had stopped, for, if you remember, Gandalf had told them to come in pairs every 5 minutes. Hello, said Beorn. You came pretty quickly. Where were you hiding? Come on, my jack in the boxes. Nori, at your service. Ori, at, they began, but Beorn interrupted them. thank you. When I want your help, I will ask for it. Sit down and let's get on with this tale, or it will be supper time before it is ended. As soon as we were asleep, went on Gandalf, a crack at the back of the cave opened. Goblins came out and grabbed the hobbit and the dwarves and our troop of ponies. Troop of ponies? What were you? A traveling circus? Or were you carrying lots of goods? Or do you always call six a troop? Oh no, as a matter of fact, there were more than six ponies, for there were more than six of us. And well, here are two more. Just at that moment, Balin and Dwalin appeared and bowed so low that their beards swept the stone floor. The big man was frowning at first, but they did their best to be frightfully polite, and kept on nodding and bending and bowing and waving their hoods before their knees in proper dwarf fashion, till he stopped frowning and burst into a chuckling laugh. They looked so comical. Troop was right, he said, a fine comic one. Come in, my merry ones. Come in, my merry men. And what are your names? I don't want your service just now, only your names, and then sit down and stop wagging. I think my boy's asleep. All right, I'm down. Here we go. Balin and Dwalin, they said, not daring to be offended, and sat flop on the floor, looking rather surprised. Now go on again, said Bjorn to the wizard. Where was I? Oh yes, I was not grabbed. I killed a goblin or two with a flash. Good, growled Bjorn. It is some good being a wizard then, and slipped inside the crack before it closed. I followed down into the main hall, which was crowded with goblins. The great goblin was there with 30 or 40 armed guards. I thought to myself, even if they were not all chained together, what can a dozen do against so many? A dozen? That's the first time I've heard 8 called a dozen. Or have you still got some more jacks that haven't come out of their boxes? Well, yes, there seems to be a couple more here now. Feely and Keely, I believe, said Gandalf, as these two now appeared and stood smiling and bowing. That's enough, said Bjorn. Sit down and be quiet, and now go on, Gandalf. So Gandalf went on with the tale until they came to the fight in the dark, the discovery of the lower gate, and their horror when they found that Mr. Baggins had been mislaid. We counted ourselves and found that there was no hobbit. There were only 14 of us left. 14? That's the first time I heard one from 10 leave 14. You mean 9? Or else you haven't told me yet all the names of your party. Well, of course, you haven't seen Oin and Gloin yet. And bless me, here they are. I hope you will forgive them for bothering you. Oh, let 'em all come. Hurry up. Come along, you two, and sit down. But look here, Gandalf. Even now we have only got yourself and 10 dwarves and the hobbit that was lost. That only makes 11, plus 1 mislaid, and not 14, unless wizards count differently to other people. But now please get on with the tale. Bjorn did not show it more than he could help, but really he had begun to get very interested. You see, in the old days, he had known the very part of the mountains that Gandalf was describing. He nodded and he growled. Let's see if I can do it this way. He nodded and he growled, and then he heard of the hobbits' reappearance and of their scramble down the stone slide and of the wolf ring in the woods. When Gandalf came to their climbing into trees with the wolves all underneath, he got up and strode about and muttered, "I wish I had been there. I would have given them more than fireworks." "Well," said Gandalf, very glad to see that his tale was making a good impression, "I did the best I could. There we were with the wolves going mad underneath us and the forest beginning to blaze in place, when the goblins came down from the hills and discovered us. They yelled with delight and sang songs making fun of us. 15 birds in 5 fir trees." "Good heavens," growled Bjorn. "Don't pretend that goblins can't count. They can. 12 isn't 15, and they know it. And so do I. There were Biffer and Bofer as well. I haven't ventured to introduce them before, but here they are." In came Biffer and Bofer. "And me," gasped Bomber, puffing up behind. He was fat and also angry at being left till last. He refused to wait 5 minutes and followed immediately after the other two. "Well, now there are 15 of you, and since goblins can count, I suppose that is all that there were up the trees. Now, perhaps, we can finish the story without any more interruptions." Mr. Baggins saw then how clever Gandalf had been. The interruptions had really made Bjorn more interested in the story, and the story had kept him from sending the dwarves off at once like suspicious beggars. He never invited people into his house, if he could help it. He had very few friends, and they lived in a good way away, and he never invited more than a couple of these to his house at a time. Now he had got 15 strangers sitting in his porch. By the time the wizard had finished his tale and had told of the eagle's rescue and of how they had all been brought to the Carracks, the sun had fallen behind the peaks of the misty mountain, and the shadows were long in Bjorn's garden. "A very good tale," said he. "The best I have heard for a long while. If all beggars could tell such a good one, they might find me kinder. You may be making it all up, of course, but you deserve a supper for the story all the time. Let's have something to eat." "Yes, please," they all said together. "Thank you very much." Inside the hall it was now quite dark. Bjorn clapped his hands, and in trotted 4 beautiful white ponies and several large, long-bodied gray dogs. Bjorn said something to them in a queer language, like animal noises turned into talk. They went out again and soon came back carrying torches in their mouths, which they lit at the fire and stuck in low brackets on the pillars of the hall about the central hearth. The dogs could stand on their hind legs when they wished, and carry things with their forefeet. Quickly they got out boards and trestles from the side walls and set them up near the fire. Then "ba, ba, ba" was heard, and in came some snow-white sheep, led by a large coal-black ram. One bore a white cloth embroidered at the edges with figures of animals. Others bore on their broad backs trays with bowls and platters and knives and wooden spoons, which the dogs took and quickly laid on the trestled tables. These were very low enough even for Bilbo to sit at comfortably. Besides them, a pony pushed 2 low-seated benches with wide rushed bottoms, and little short thick legs for Gandalf and Thorin, while at the far end he put Bjorn's big black chair at the same sort, in which he sat with his great legs stuck far out under the table. These were all the chairs he had in his hall, and he probably had them low like the tables for the convenience of the wonderful animals that waited on him. What did the rest sit on? They were not forgotten. The other ponies came in rolling round drum-shaped sections of logs, smooth and polished, and low enough even for Bilbo. So soon they were all seated at Bjorn's table, and the hall had not seen such a gathering for many a year. There they had a supper or a dinner such as they had not had since they left the last homely house in the west and said goodbye to Elrond. The light of the torches and the fire flickered about them, and on the table were two tall red beeswax candles. All the time they are. Bjorn, in his deep, rolling voice, told tales of the wild lands on the side of the mountain, and especially of the dark and dangerous wood that lay outstretched far to north and south, a day's ride before them. Barring their way to the east, the terrible forest of Mirkwood. The dwarves listened and shook their beards, for they knew that they must soon venture into that forest, and that after the mountains it was the worst of the perils that they had to pass before they came to the dragon's stronghold. When dinner was over, they began to tell tales of their own, but Bjorn seemed to be growling and growing drowsy, and paid little heed to them. They spoke most of gold and silver and jewels and the making of things by smithcraft, and Bjorn did not appear to care for such things. There were no things of gold or silver in his hall, and few save the knives were made of metal at all. They sat long at the table with their wooden drinking bowls filled with mead. The dark night came on outside. The fires in the middle of the hall were built with fresh logs, and the torches were put out, and still they sat in the light of the dancing flames, with the pillars of the house standing tall behind them, and dark at the top like trees of the forest. Whether it was magic or not, it seemed to Bilbo that he heard a sound like wind in the branches stirring in the rafters, and the hoot of owls. Soon he began to nod with sleep, and the voices seemed to grow far away, until he woke with a start. The great door had creaked and slammed. Bjorn was gone. The dwarves were sitting cross-legged on the floor round the fire, and presently they began to sing. Some of the verses were like this, but there were many more, and their singing went on for a long time. The wind was on the withered heath, but in the forest stirred no leaf. Bare shadows lay by night and day, and dark things silent crept beneath. The wind came down from mountains cold, and like a tide it roared and rolled. The branches groaned, the forest moaned, and leaves were laid upon the mold. The wind went from the west to east, all movements in the forest ceased. But thrills and harsh across the marsh in whistling voices were released. The grasses hissed, their tassels bent, the reeds were rattling, on it went. O'er shaken pools under heavens cool, where racing clouds were torn and rent. Rent, 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 rent. Dun, 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 dun. It passed the lonely mountain bare and swept above the dragon's lair. There black and dark lay boulder stark, and flying smoke was made in the air. In the air, in the air. It left the world and took its flight o'er the white seas of the night. The moon sat sail upon the gale, and stars were fanned in leaping light. The light, the light, the light, the light. And on and on and on and on it went. And on it went. Bilbo began to nod again. Suddenly up stood Gandalf. "It is time for us to sleep," he said. "For us, but not, I think, for Bjorn. In this hall we can rest sound and safe. But I warn you all not to forget what Bjorn said before he left us. You must not stray outside until the sun is up, or on your peril." Bilbo found that beds had already been laid at the side of the hall, on a sort of raised platform between the pillars and the outer walls. For him there was a little mattress of straw and woolen blankets. He snuggled into them very gladly. Summertime though it was, the fire burned low, and he fell asleep. Yet in the night he woke. The fire had now sunk to a few embers. The dwarves and Gandalf were all asleep. To judge by their breathing, a splash of white on the floor came from the high moon, which was peering down through the smoke hole in the roof. There was a growling sound outside, and a noise as of some great animal scuffling at the door. Bilbo wondered what it was, and whether it could be Bjorn in enchanted shape, and if he would come in as a bear and kill them. He dived under the blankets and hid his head, and fell asleep again at last, in spite of his fears. It was full morning when he woke. One of the dwarves had fallen over him in the shadows where he lay, and he had rolled down with a bump from the platform on the floor. It was Bofur, and he was grumbling about it when Bilbo opened his eyes. "Get up, lazy bones," he said, "or there will be no breakfast left for you." Up jumped Bilbo. "Breakfast?" he cried. "Where is breakfast?" "Mostly inside us," answered the other dwarves, who were moving about the hall. "But what is left is out on the veranda. We have been about looking for Bjorn ever since the sun got up, but there is no sign of him anywhere, though we found breakfast laid as soon as we went out. Where is Gandalf?" asked Bilbo, moving off to find something to eat as quick as he could. "Oh, out and about somewhere," they said and told them. "But we saw no sign of the wizard at all that day until the evening, just before sunset. he walked into the hall, where the hobbit and the dwarves were having supper. Just before sunset, he walked into the hall, where the hobbits and the dwarves were having supper, waited on by Bjorn's wonderful animals as they had been all day. Of Bjorn they had seen and heard nothing since the night before, and they were getting puzzled. Where is our host, and where have you been all day yourself? They all cried, one question at a time, and none till after supper. I haven't had a bite since breakfast. At last Gandalf pushed away his plate and jug. He had eaten 2 whole loaves with masses of butter and honey and clotted cream, and drunk at least a quart of mead, and he took out his pipe. I will answer the second question first, he said, but bless me, this is a splendid place for smoke rings. Indeed, for a long time they could get nothing more out of him. He was so busy sending smoke rings, dodging round the pillars of the hall, changing them into all sorts of different shapes and colors, and setting them at last chasing one another out of the hole in the roof. They must have looked very queer from outside, popping out into the air one after another. Green, blue, red, silver, gray, yellow, white, big ones, little ones dodging through big ones, and joining into figure eights, and going off like a flock of birds into the distance. I have been picking out bear tracks, he said at last. There must have been a regular bears meeting outside here last night. I soon saw that Bjorn could not have made them all. There were far too many of them, and they were of various sizes too.